The Untold Story of Charlie Kirk, Boy Who Refused to Stay Silent. The auditorium was filled with restless energy, a buzzing crowd of teenagers waiting for another routine school assembly. Teachers stood at the edges, arms folded, prepared for an hour of speeches no one would remember. But that day, something unusual was about to happen. A boy who wasn't meant to speak was about to step forward, a boy who refused to stay silent. His name was Charlie Kirk. Charlie wasn't the loudest in class. In fact, most of the time, he blended in, the kind of student teachers often forgot to call on, the kind of boy people saw walking through the halls but rarely noticed. Yet inside him burned a fire, a conviction too strong to be ignored. From a young age, he had learned that life wasn't always fair, that speaking truth often came at a cost. But he also believed that silence was the slow death of courage. It all began when Charlie was just 12 years old. He had watched his father work tirelessly, taking night shifts just to provide for the family. He had seen his mother hold the household together with quiet strength, often skipping her own meals to make sure the children had enough. Charlie admired their sacrifice, but he also saw something deeper. He saw how ordinary people often had no voice, how decisions that affected their lives were made in rooms they could never enter. That realization marked him forever. At school, Charlie often noticed how students who dared to question things were silenced. Just follow the rules, teachers would say. Don't ask why. Don't challenge. For most kids, that was enough. They shrugged and moved on. But not Charlie. He carried questions like stones in his pocket, too heavy to ignore. Why couldn't people speak freely without fear of being judged? Why was truth treated like a dangerous secret? The turning point came one afternoon during a history class. The teacher was lecturing about freedom, democracy, and courage, reciting from the textbook in a monotone voice. Charlie's hand shot up. If freedom is so important, he asked, why do people get punished for saying things others don't like? The room froze. Students exchanged nervous glances. The teacher's eyes narrowed. That's not appropriate, Charlie. Just stick to the lesson. But Charlie didn't stop. Isn't that the whole point of freedom? That we're supposed to question. That we're supposed to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable. The silence was deafening. Some kids smirked, others looked down at the desks, unwilling to be caught in the storm. The teacher's voice sharpened. Enough, Charlie. Sit down. He did sit down, but something inside him had risen and refused to sink back. From that day, he knew his path would not be ordinary. As he grew older, the challenges only grew heavier. When he joined debate clubs, he was ridiculed for the arguments he made. Teachers told him he was too controversial, classmates laughed behind his back, and sometimes even friends distanced themselves. More than once, Charlie went home in tears, wondering if speaking up was worth the loneliness it brought. But every night, he remembered his father's calloused hands, his mother's tired smile. He remembered the quiet sacrifices that went unseen. And he whispered to himself, if I don't speak, who will? In high school, Charlie began organizing small gatherings where students could openly share their views. At first, only a handful came. They sat in a circle, voices shaky, afraid someone might report them. But week after week, the circle grew. Kids who had never dared to speak before found themselves telling their truths. Some spoke about family struggles, others about unfair treatment, others about dreams they had buried deep inside. Charlie listened, encouraged, and reminded them that their voices mattered. Not everyone was happy. The school administration tried to shut the meetings down. Teachers warned him that this freedom talk was disruptive. Some parents even complained that Charlie was a troublemaker. But he refused to back down. I'd rather be called a troublemaker, he said, than stay silent when I know silence is wrong. The backlash was fierce. There were days when Charlie felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. He lost friends. He was mocked in hallways. Sometimes he questioned himself. Maybe he really was just a kid who didn't know better. But then, one night, he opened his notebook and read the words he had scribbled months ago. the price of silence is higher than the cost of speaking truth. That sentence became his shield. Then came the moment that would change everything. His school held a major assembly, attended by students, parents, and even local officials. It was meant to be a celebration of achievements, but to Charlie, it felt like another performance of empty words. He wasn't supposed to speak, but as he watched the stage fill with polished speeches, he felt something burning inside. His heart pounded, palms sweating, but his mind was clear. When the principal asked if any students wanted to share a few words, no one moved. Then, slowly, Charlie stood up. Murmurs rippled through the audience. The principal hesitated but gave a reluctant nod. Charlie walked to the stage, his legs trembling, but his voice steady. "I wasn't invited to speak today," he began, "but I believe I need to. Because sometimes silence is the loudest kind of betrayal." The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward him. We're told every day that we live in freedom. But if freedom means keeping quiet when something feels wrong, is that really freedom? If we punish people for speaking truth, then what kind of future are we building? His voice rose with each word. "I'm not here to attack anyone. I'm here to remind us all that courage doesn't mean never being afraid. It means speaking up, even when your voice shakes. It means refusing to stay silent, even when silence is easier." The crowd was stunned. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others listened with wide eyes. A few teachers frowned, but in the back of the auditorium, a father with tired hands and a mother with weary eyes exchanged a glance filled with pride. Charlie ended with words that would echo long after the assembly ended. "Maybe I'm just a boy. Maybe my voice isn't much. But if I can encourage even one person to stop hiding, to start speaking, then I know I've done the right thing. Because silence never changes anything. But truth can change everything." When he stepped down, there was no thunderous applause. Only silence. But it was not the silence of dismissal. It was the silence of reflection. The silence that comes when words sink too deep to be ignored. That day, Charlie walked home with his head high. He knew he had stirred something, even if it was uncomfortable. He knew that change didn't come with cheers, but with courage. He knew that his path would not be easy, but it would be meaningful. Years later, when people would ask him why he started, why he risked so much, he would simply smile and say, "Because silence was never an option." And that is the untold story of Charlie Kirk, the boy who refused to stay silent, the boy who chose courage over comfort, the boy whose voice became a spark for others to find their own. His journey teaches us something we must never forget. It only takes one voice to break the silence, one act of courage to light a fire, one ordinary person to remind the world that truth, no matter how small, is never powerless. So the next time you feel afraid to speak, remember Charlie's story. Remember that silence may feel safe, but it changes nothing. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stand up, even if your voice shakes, and refuse, absolutely refuse, to stay silent.